Hi everyone, my name is Richard. I'm a pensioner from Gloucestershire who took up caravanning 6 months ago. I bought a 2006 Swift Challenger, so it's been a really steep learning curve, not just on caravanning itself but also fixing a whole variety of issues that have come up. What I want to show you is how to replace the bearings on a Powrtouch Classic Motor Mover. In preparing to do the first side, I did some research, but there wasn't really much online other than people having problems getting the cover off, getting the bearings off. So when I started, I was full of trepidation, if I'm honest. But having done one side, I'll show you how to do the other. I did break the cover, getting the first one off, but when it came off, it was obvious what you have to do to get them off without breaking them. So I'll show you how to do it. I've taken the second one off without any issues at all, but I'll show you how I did it. Okay, so here we are down at the dirty end of the caravan. First three things you need to make sure you've done. 1, you've got the handbrake on. 2, you've disengaged the motor mover, so it's not pressing against the tyre. And thirdly, you've got the darn thing switched off at the isolator, because the last thing you want to do when you're taking off the cables is to have a short circuit. So make sure you've done those three things. Now, first thing you do, a couple of flat screwdrivers behind this little tab, and hey presto, that's the first one off. Now, here's the good bit. Put this in, undo it probably a good centimetre so it's actually sticking out quite a long way. Now, make sure that it's still engaged with the thread. That's really important. Then what you do is you tap it back in. See that pop in? Then give it a little tug, see if it comes off. Well, in my case it does, because I've done it once before. But when I first did this, it took about 3 attempts, and each time I'd undo this a bit more because it was still in, get it to come out. It's not coming out on this now because it's actually doing what it should do, which is pushing the block away. But always make sure before you tap it, don't you progressively increase the force that you're whacking it with. Make sure the thread is engaged, otherwise the block it's coming out of could ping into the chassis member, and then you'll be fishing it out with a piece of wire. But each time you knock it back in again, give it a little try, and hey presto, look at that. Now the reason is that bolt doesn't go into this chassis member, it goes into this wedge-shaped block. It's got a chamfer on it, and as you do it up, it pulls it into that section, which spreads it to grip the inside of the cross member. What happens is it all gets stuck. You take the bolt out, but that block is still stuck in there. So by progressively hitting it back in, you basically force that out and release the pressure on there. So as a bit of a hint, when you go to put it back together again, clean it all up, including the grubby cross member in there and that. But I don't think you need to lubricate it, just maybe lubricate the block if you really need to. But that's the secret, no cracks. The other one, I literally broke that section off, and I had to glue it using JB Weld 2-part epoxy, which did a good job, but obviously it never looks as good as when it's perfect. Okay, so that's the first bit. We got the cover off. Okay, so the next stage is to take off the very large spring and the rubber boot and the electrical connections. I use a pair of pliers at this end to pull that off. I would recommend that you put a little bit of red tape on the side that's positive, just so that you know when you put it back on which way around to put the cables, because they're all floppy, they could go either way. So that's what I suggest. After I've stuck this on, I need to remove the two main horizontal bolts that run through the whole assembly. The threads for these are actually in the back plate, but there are lock nuts on the back, which I found actually just dropped off when I unwound the bolts and pulled them out. Congratulations, it's a beautiful baby boy. I've undone the 3 bolts at this end and the bolts that hold the cover on. Now, as you can see, there's loads of grease in there. At first I thought it looked dried out, but I think it's actually industrial grease, because it's still very mobile but very sticky. I think that's to stop it, if it gets very hot and these are rotating, I'm guessing it's to stop it being thrown off or flung off the actual teeth of the gears. So what I'm going to do is reuse this, because look, it's nice and sticky. Looks good stuff. Most of my grease is clear, but I don't think that's actually contaminated. So in order to test whether these bearings are okay, you need to take the idler gear off, but it really won't come out until you take this off. So you literally take this off like that. So keep the two together so you know which way they go back in. I think the grease will be a clue. And then you should be able to get this off. Oh look, nice and easy peasy. Did a bit. Yeah, there we go, beautiful. So, if you notice, remember, the shoulder goes towards the main structure. Yeah? So this will now come off, or it should do. Yeah, it's not, but basically, guys, there's nothing wrong with those bearings at all. When you bear in mind, when I did the other side, the symptom was when the motor mover was engaged, it would make a terrible noise, something like when I took the roller off, the bearing on the larger side was absolutely seized up. It wouldn't rotate at all. But quite frankly, that's lovely and smooth. So I'm not going to bother replacing that. I think that'd be a waste of money, really. What I shall do is re-grease the whole thing and just reassemble it. And go from there, basically. So that's good news. The only snag is you won't see how I actually got the bearings off. I used a very light hammer, sort of like a pane hammer, I think they're called, to get this end off. This one I used, because it was stuck to the actual roller itself, I used this sharp kind of engineering screwdriver just to get in between the bearing and the alloy, and very gently went round prising it, WD-40 down the end, prised it a bit more, and gradually it started to move up relatively straightforward. Then I put in a bigger screwdriver and just sort of nudged it, continually going round and round so as not to basically, you know, twist the bearing. And then ultimately I just tapped it off. And it came off relatively easily in comparison to what I thought, because a lot of people had reported that, you know, it was impossible to get off. If you do run into problems, you can buy 2 rollers with the bearings fitted direct from Powrtouch for, I think it's £70. So that would replace them all. just the bearings themselves are about £12 for one side from Powrtouch, or you can buy them from eBay for about £7. But that's only one side. If you buy the rollers, you actually get both rollers and 2 sets of bearings. But that would certainly mean you wouldn't have to get the bearings off, and you'd get fresh rollers. Which apparently, if you've got the old style ones which have got like gritted, they're like got grit stuck on them, apparently they recommend that you put these on anyway. But anyway, so for me, things are looking good. Better than last time, that's for sure. So guys, I've put the gears back in again, screwed it up. As you can see, I've spread all of that grease that was around the cake, around the cover, etc., around the edges, and I've actually smeared it all the way around all of the teeth on the cogs, so that I think that should run nice and smoothly. So, got the end back on, got the cover on. The next bit, I need to clean the whole thing up, and in particular, both sides, mainly this side and that side of this rail here, because when you actually engage the motor mover, this slides along the inside of the main chassis sort of member, so that has to be well lubricated, and that's actually part of the maintenance that you're supposed to do. But of course, if you can't get the stupid cover off, you can't do it, can you? You know, I sprayed loads of stuff in here because I couldn't get the cover off, but being able to get the cover off makes a big difference. Also, as I mentioned earlier on, it's probably worth cleaning up the electrical terminals at this stage because you're indoors, it's nice and dry. If you notice, I've actually got my red sticky label where the positive goes, which is really good because the 2 rivets that hold the connector on this side have actually painted red, which is a bit worrying. Gives me some self-doubt there, but I'm pretty certain I put the sticker where the brown cable went. So, cleaned it up, it's come up nice and clean. The only thing I regret is maybe, whilst I was able to rotate this, not actually brushing that off the actual roller, but c'est la vie. Having it all been clean now, the area to apply grease, as I mentioned before, is along that edge and along that edge, because that's the bits that actually rub against each other. And then also this, the axle that it, or the rod that it rotates on, and maybe inside, and the little spacer as well underneath, just to keep all that moving nicely. When I actually searched for the locking nuts that held the whole motor mover in place, I couldn't find them. So I got a feeling there weren't any on, because I hadn't checked. But guys, if ever you're going through Aldi or Lidl, and they've got these like little trays full of bits like nuts, washers, O-rings, you name it, all sorts of bits, whether you need them or not, buy them, because they're only like £2.99, because I've actually got lock nuts that fit perfectly, the ones with the little blue rings in them that mean you don't need to use Loctite to actually hold them on, so they are proper lock nuts. So yeah, so that's now ready to go back on as soon as I've used a bit of grease, as I say, on those edges. Hi, so we're getting towards the end now. I put some spray inside this joint at the back, but basically I've cleaned up the whole area and put lots of grease on the interior 2 sides, 2 faces that face inwards, that rub against the 2 outsides of the plates on the motor assembly. So that's all nicely lubed up and ready to take the motor mover itself. One tip is, if it will reach, it's probably worth connecting the back electrical connector first, because it's really tricky to get to and to do it properly once it's actually in situ. So we're nearly there, got it back in, got that onto the actual loop. Now these 2 bolts go in. Remember what I said last time, don't expect them to push all the way through when you do the nut up. because the thread is actually on the back plate. So they get in that far and then you have to do them up. As you can see, a lot of the grease has come out because obviously I was very generous. The reason why I cleaned all of that grease out was because it does get very contaminated, because this is where all the mud and the dirt basically get thrown up from the road and contaminate the grease. So I unfortunately couldn't get the back connector on. The cable was too short. On with the spring. And needless to say, this spring is very, very tight. So it does need quite a bit of effort. I made that look easy, it wasn't. And it needs to be over the channel at both top and bottom. So that's now on. I've still got to put the connectors on, got to put the locking nuts on the back, and then of course the complete cover goes back on. No cracks. Good stuff. So there we go, guys. Got it all back together, got the cover back on, got the motor connectors on and the rubber boot. Just for extra measures, I've got a giant zip tie on there as well. I don't want the cover flying off like it did previously. Got the lock nuts on around the back. I doubt if you could see them. No. But yeah, the lock nuts went on nice and easily. So, glad to say, looks like we're done. Altogether, it's taken about 2.5 hours, I'd say, 2.5, which includes me turning the camera on and off and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I hope you found that useful. I'm not a mechanic, so if there's anything that I've done that you think, well, you should have replaced the grease or something like that, post it down below, because it'll certainly help other people. I say, if only someone had posted how to get that cover off, it would have saved so much grief. But hope you found that useful, and good luck with yours. Cheers.